All right. Greetings, everybody. What's going on? Good afternoon. Good Saturday to all you beautiful people out there. This is your one and only girl, Tiffany L. French. Today is November the 21st, 2020. All right. So today's topic, I'm going to get into the discussion about Free Frank McWorter and New Philadelphia, Illinois. Excuse me. All right. So now one of the most important factors when we talk about our people, right? And we talk about the things they have accomplished. One of the things that we must speak on is not the fact that they just only did the entrepreneurship, not only the fact that they were educators, but they also founded cities, towns, neighborhoods, which go unnoticed. So today, the topic is going to be dealing with New Philadelphia, Illinois, which is no longer a city. So it's considered part of the historic national park. All right. So it was once an all African-American town, which was founded by Free Frank McWorter. And it was pretty much designated for the community, for the African-American community, for those who were free and enslaved. There were those who granted the opportunity of looking and purchasing land and start their own neighborhoods, start their own community, and have their own cities. Okay, that's designated for them because they weren't able to live in other places. They weren't able to find jobs. They weren't able to be integrated with their white counterparts or any other racial group. So they wanted something that was designated for the African-American community. All right. And today we're going to go ahead and get into the topic of discussion. So if you want to go ahead and share this video, please do so. Make sure you subscribe and hit the channel, hit the notification bell whenever I come on. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Oh, excuse me. All right, so let's get started on Frank McWorter. So who was Frank McWorter? And as you can see, I'm on the Wikipedia website. So Frank McWorter was born on 1777 and he died September 7, 1854. He was an American slave who bought his freedom and in 1836 founded the town of New Philadelphia in Illinois. He was the first African-American to found a town in the United States. The New Philadelphia town site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2005 and designated a National Historic Landmark in 2009. In the late 20th century, a local history group recruited archaeologists to explore the long abandoned town site. Teams from the University of Maryland, College Park, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, and DePaul University have worked for years on research and excavations, collected data about residents from census and land records, and turned up thousands of artifacts. In addition, they have trained students at Summerfield schools and published reports, articles, and books on the history of McWorter and his family and his town. McWorter descendants donated the collection, 11 volumes of documentation, to the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library in February of 2008. In addition, the family donated a bronze bust of Frank McWorter by his great-great-granddaughter, Shirley McWorter Moss. So there was archaeological research regarding to this town, and the information about it because it's been abandoned for so many years. Greeting to the chat. Peace, brother. Thank you for coming in. So, yeah, the town has been abandoned for so many years. They decided that, okay, let's go ahead and do some archaeology. Let's dig up some findings. Let's see what we can find out about this area and why it hasn't been so abandoned. So, let's see what else they discover according to Wikipedia. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's just look at his biography real quick. So it said he was born in 1777 into slavery in South Carolina to Judah, born in West Africa, abducted into slavery and transported to the colony. His father was likely her white master, George McWorter, a Scots-Irish planter. According to family tradition, Judah had convinced McWorter to allow his mixed-race son to live. In 1795, McWorter moved to Pulaski County, Kentucky, and took Frank to build and later manage his holdings there. Frank tended the farm, but McWorter also leased him to work for neighbors as a laborer. From being hired out, Frank learned business skills and earned more money than his master required him to hand over. After McWorter moved to Tennessee, he continued to have Frank manage his farm in Kentucky. Frank used his savings to create a saltpeter production operation for which there was considerable demand during the War of 1812. So what is a saltpeter? All right, just out of curiosity. Okay, so that's potassium nitrate is a chemical compound with the chemical formula KNO3. It is an ionic salt of potassium ions K positive and the nitrate ions NO3, and is therefore an alkali metal nitrate. It occurs in nature as mineral nitre. It is a source of nitrogen, and nitrogen was named after nitre. Potassium nitrate is one of several nitrogen-containing compounds collectively referred to as saltpeter or saltpeter. Major uses of potassium nitrate are in fertilizers, tree stump removal, rocket propellants, fireworks. It is one of the major constituents of gunpowder, black powder. In processed meats, potassium nitrate reacts with hemoglobin, and generates a pink color. Okay. That's interesting. Okay, let's read down here what the etymology say. Potassium nitrate, because of its early and global use and production, has many names. Hebrew and Egyptian words for it had the constant neter, indicating likely cognation. In the Greek natron, which was Latinized to nitrum and nitrium. Thence Old French had neter and Middle English neter. By the 15th century, Europeans referred to it as saltpeter and later as nitrate of potash, as the chemistry of the compound was more fully understood. Okay, the Arabs call it Chinese snow. It was called Chinese salt by the Iranians and Persians, or salt from Chinese salt marshes. Okay, that's interesting. So that's some interesting information, okay? But let's continue back to his story. So he was dealing with a little science right there. So marriage and family. In 1799, Frank married Lucy, an enslaved African-American, on a neighboring plantation. They had 13 children born into slavery, of which 4, Judah, Frank, Sally, and Solomon, survived. By 1817, Frank had earned enough money to buy Lucy from her master for $800. She was pregnant at the time with their son, Squire, and he was later freeborn. 2 years after that, in 1819, Frank bought his own freedom at the same price. He then called himself Free Frank, which served notice that he was legally free, and that it was known to townspeople that he was free. It was not uncommon for free black citizens to be kidnapped and enslaved. In 1829, Free Frank traded his saltpeter plant in exchange for the freedom of his son Frank, who had fled to Canada and was a fugitive. This allowed his son to return to the United States as a free man. By this time, he and Lucy also had 3 surviving freeborn children: Squirrel, Commodore, and Lucienne. Okay. So altogether, he had 13 kids, and his wife was a slave, and he also purchased her freedom along with his. And so with that being the case, they were able to move to Illinois, and they moved to Illinois in 1830. And their 4 free children moved to Pike County, Illinois. By the second year, they started farming. In 1836, Frank filed a plat to create the village of New Philadelphia on 80 acres of land, which he had purchased from the federal government for $100. The town site, which was divided into 144 lots, was registered with government authorities in 1836. McWorter established residence in New Philadelphia with his family and sold other lots to new residents. Both blacks and whites settled there and supported an integrated school. It was the crossroads of an agricultural community, and when founded, proposed it as being on the route of a planned Illinois-Michigan canal, which was never built. All right, so we're going to look at more into about New Philadelphia. In 1837, Free Frank petitioned the Illinois legislature, as was required, so that he could officially take the surname McWorter. In that same year, the legislation was passed to make Frank McWorter his legal name. This technically enabled him to have certain rights normally reserved for white men in Illinois. He could bring lawsuits to court and could legally marry his wife over 40 years, but he still could not vote. McWorter was the first black man in the United States to incorporate a municipality. He served as mayor of New Philadelphia, which was soon settled by African Americans and European Americans for years. McWorter lived most of his life in Western Illinois, with intervals in Kentucky before the American Civil War to buy freedom for his 3 grown children and grandchildren left in Kentucky. For instance, in 1835, he returned and purchased the freedom of his son, Solomon. On each trip, he risked capture by unscrupulous slave traders, despite his legally free status. McWorter died on September 7, 1854. By that time, he had bought the freedom of 8 more of his relatives. Through his works, he gained freedom for 16 members of his family. His heirs used his inheritance to free 7 more relatives. All right. So that's the story about Frank McWorter. Let's go ahead and as a matter of fact, let me show you guys a picture of him. Oops. That's the wrong one. All right. Let's see. All right, so that is a picture of Frank. Well, that's supposed to be like a sculpture, a statue of Frank McWorter. Greetings, hotel, peace to everybody in the chat. So that's supposed to be a picture of Frank McWorter. All right, that's him as a free man. That's his picture. Okay, so let's see. Let's see what else we can find. Give me a second. All right, so let's look at the story about New Philadelphia, Illinois. Okay. So here it is, New Philadelphia town site. The New Philadelphia town site is the original site of the now vanished town of New Philadelphia, Illinois. It is located near the city of Berry in Pike County. Founded in 1836, it was the first town in the United States platted and registered by an African American before the American Civil War. The founder, Free Frank McWorter, was a former slave who was able to save money from his work and his own business to purchase the freedom of his wife, himself, and 13 members of his family in Kentucky. The town site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 2005, designated a National Historic Landmark in 2009. All right. Now, check this out. It goes in to say that Free Frank McWorter moved to Illinois in 1830 with his family and founded a town which he thought would benefit from the commerce along the planned Illinois and Michigan Canal. The original town plan consists of 144 lots in a 12 by 12 square, including 22 crisscrossing named streets. McWorter officially registered his town with government authorities and sold the lots. The town was integrated. Abated with some typical 19th century segregated facilities such as cemeteries. There were one integrated public school. McWorter lived there for the remainder of his life. He made brief visits to Kentucky to purchase freedom for much of the remainder of his family. McWorter died in 1854. Before the Civil War, the New Philadelphia had become one of the stations along the Underground Railroad for shepherding escaped slaves to Canada. With emancipation, more settlers arrived in New Philadelphia. Its population peaked at close to 160 shortly after 1865. Okay. In 1869, the Hannibal and Naples Railroad was built. It bypassed the town on the north, and a station was built in nearby Berry, soon to be followed by transit and commerce. New Philadelphia rapidly declined in population thereafter. A small number of residents returned to farming a portion of the former town site. Such changes in abandonment were not unusual for U.S. small towns in the late 19th century, especially those bypassed by changing transportation facilities. In 1885, a portion of the town was legally dissolved. It was reverted to farmland. Modern archaeological studies have indicated the area was inhabited through the 1920s. By the late 20th century, all vestiges of New Philadelphia had vanished, and save fragments of glass and pottery and trace of the town's gravel streets. The town site was added to the U.S. National Register of Historic Places on August 11, 2005. Subsequently, New Philadelphia town site was designated a National Historic Landmark on January 16, 2009 because of the significance of its history and archaeology. All right. So then let's go down to about the excavation. Just give me one moment. All righty, I'm back. Okay, so let's look at it. Since 2000, in 2003, a 3-year excavation began with $226,500 granted from the National Science Foundation. It was coordinated by Dr. Paul H. Shackle, the lead at University of Maryland, College Park, with participation by scholars from the University of Illinois, Urbana Champaign. By 2006, the archaeology team had surveyed 14 of the 144 lots. In August of 2005, the town site was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In 2008, Christopher C. Fennell of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign led the summer excavation team under a new grant. In June of 2008, the Public Broadcasting Service filmed material at the dig, which was released as an episode of Time Team America. In January of 2009, the town site was designated a National Historic Landmark by the Department of the Interior. In June of 2010, Aaron Chirac, a U.S. representative from Illinois, introduced bipartisan legislation to direct the Department of Interior to study the new Philadelphia town site for possible designation as a national park. If approved, it will be the first such park in Illinois. On February 28th of 2013, Chirac introduced the legislation again, the new Philadelphia, Illinois Study Act, H.R. 930, 113th Congress, after its failure to become law in any previous Congress. All right, so that's the information. I have more to present. I'm not finished yet. Okay. So it's called Remembering New Philadelphia by Paul A. Shackles. Okay. All right. So it's called the Development of New Philadelphia. So the New Philadelphia is situated about 25 miles east of the Mississippi River, with the closest major port towns being Hannibal, Missouri, and Quincy, Illinois. Unlike many of the other planet towns that developed in the 1830s, New Philadelphia was legally founded by a free African American, according to say Frank McWorter, as you can see. All right, so let's skip all the way down. Let's see what else we can find. And it says New Philadelphia was at the time referred to as Philadelphia, comprised 20 blocks with the most containing 8 lots that measured 60 by 120 feet each. In total, the town had 144 lots along with streets and alleys. The community's 2 main thoroughfares, Broad and Main Street, were platted as 80 feet wide. Secondary streets were 60 feet wide and alleys measured 15 feet wide. Okay. So it says from the beginning of the town, both whites and blacks purchased town lots, although the Panic of 1837 brought an end to broader scales of land speculation in Illinois, and supplies of materials and labor also decreased significantly. I'm saying, hold on. Trying to see what I did. Okay, so many towns established during the 1830s disappeared or never developed. New Philadelphia survived, however, by the late 1840s, the town lot began to sell. By the 1850s, rumors spread about the possibility of a railroad crossing Pike County. The place began to bustle, and the town attracted craftspeople, merchants, and laborers. And it says the 1855 Illinois State Census lists New Philadelphia as a small rural town with 58 people living in 11 households. The community included a Baptist preacher, a cabinet maker, a laborer, 2 merchants, 2 shoemakers, a wheelwright, and 4 farmers. About 1/4 of the town's residents had been born in Illinois. the town's population grew steadily and peaked in 1865 at about 160 residents. All right. Then right over here, it says, remembering New Philadelphia. New Philadelphia is now an archaeological site covered by agricultural and fallow fields, as well as prairie grass. The Burdick House, burnt in the 1930s, survives and is surrounded by a stand of trees. A few exploited foundations are still visible at the surface. Currently, the former town site is divided among several landowners, and they are all sympathetic to archaeology projects. One landowner moved several cabinets and sheds to the site from other locations in Pike County in 1998 and placed them on exposed foundation. One of these structures, a log cabin, dates to the mid-19th century, and the other cabinet and sheds date to about the beginning of the 20th century. All right. So the buildings do not fit exactly over the foundation, although from a distance, their presence create an imagined built landscape. We do not know if log or frame or clapboard structures sat on the visible foundation, nor is the exact height of each original building known. The imported structures have been there for about a decade, and their presence, now unquestioned, have come to be considered historically authentic. While community members have a sense of the reconstructed character of the landscape, many of those from outside the community see it as accurate and part of the historic landscape. The associated meanings of that landscape, however, making African American history anchored in a place, Pike County, and in the time from the mid-19th through the early 20th century. All right. The history of the entire town and awareness of the McWorter family have never completely vanished from the memory of the local community. While New Philadelphia transformed from a bustling small rural town to a less urban and sparsely inhabited community by the turn of the 20th century, it still maintained its identity. All right, so that's a little information about. This is more information about New Philadelphia. So the article is called Remembering New Philadelphia, and it's written by Paul A. Shackles. All right. So, and here's the information at the bottom of the page right here, the reference. So if you want, it goes in historical archaeology. I think that's volume 44, number 1. So if you want to look it up, all you got to do is just just type this information, Remembering New Philadelphia, put in Paul A. Shackles, and you can find whatever information you need on this. So this is the history about the Black towns. So now I have a video that will go into more details about Frank McWorter and the New Philadelphia. So his descendants are in this video, and they're speaking on how he founded the town, how he earned his freedom, and all that great stuff. All right. So let's see.
Very, very hard.
Hold on. Let's go to the beginning.
Lord, Lord, hallelujah. We're located at a site called New Philadelphia. New Philadelphia was founded. Lord, Lord.
Hold on.
Lord, Lord.
Give me a second, you guys. I'm trying to see if I can. All right, there we go.
We're located at a site called New Philadelphia. New Philadelphia was founded by Frank McWorter in 1836. The town no longer exists today. If you look behind me, there's lots of prairie grass behind me. And we're here with the National Science Foundation grant to rediscover New Philadelphia.
New Philadelphia is just remarkably significant in that it was founded by Free Frank McWorter, who had purchased himself out of slavery, came here, planned this town in advance, legally founded it, and then it grew as a multiracial town in a region that was filled with racial strife. His mother was West African. His father was likely George McWorter, a Scots-Irish planter, who was also his owner. And he's born in 1777 in South Carolina. In his 20s and 30s, moves with George McWorter to Kentucky, where George McWorter was setting up a new plantation in that area.
He was the son of his owner and actually had a managerial role on the farm in Kentucky and was able to hire himself out to mine saltpeter and then eventually to become a landowner himself.
He sees the developing Illinois frontier and the availability of land. He purchased the freedom for his wife, his own freedom. He has a few grown children. And in about the 1820s, he begins to focus on purchasing land here in Illinois and now moving his family to Illinois.
What he wanted to do was to create a town, and he divided it up into 144 lots, and he began to sell lots in this town. And from the proceeds of selling that land, he was able to purchase members of his family out of slavery.
You know, it's just incredible. A man who spent 40 years working and very, very hard and saving every penny, being very frugal, being very clever.
In his lifetime, he purchases the freedom of 16 members of his entire family out of bondage. For a cash outlay in the currency of that day was about $14,000 in 19th century funds. If you calculate that for today, he was able to accumulate and expend over $300,000 to purchase 16 members of his family. So it's both a story of incredible freedom and his ability to overcome the adversity of slavery, but then also just a brilliant man. He saw the opportunities of starting a mining operation at one point that helped in that process. He saw the opportunity of moving to Illinois and new land and settlement and coming here, Pike County, Illinois, where he had moved.
New Philadelphia grew slowly. In 1855, there were about 58 people here. In 1865, there were about 160 people here.
Population peaks in the census records in 1865 with about 160 residents, 30 households, several merchants. There was a cabinet maker, 2 shoemakers, blacksmiths, a wainwright, a wheelwright. There was a Baptist preacher in town.
What's interesting about New Philadelphia to me is that during the course of its history, it was a biracial town. That maybe 30 to 35% of the people were classified as African Americans, and the rest were classified as white during the town's history. And so while there was a hierarchy based on race out here, there tended to be more cooperation and barn building and helping each other out. People had to survive, and they had to work with each other to survive. And that's one of the reasons why I think there was less tension here than other places.
We've never found a record of any major turmoil or problems, and the blacks and whites lived here together peacefully before the Civil War, 20 miles from Missouri, which was a slave state. They helped they lived together, they worshiped together, they intermarried. So I think it's something we can all learn a lesson from.
To call it New Philadelphia, we've always assumed that it was the new city of brotherly love. I mean, that's what the family tradition is, that it was a conscious decision to say that we want to rebuild America anew, right up next to slavery. And white people came and lived here. So apparently, for some time, it worked.
And I suspect the European Americans who moved here were of like mind. I think the story and the intent of the founder and also of the residents here would have been known by word of mouth, so that you probably had a town of individuals who were comfortable with that notion of a multiracial community, they probably realized the risks of it, and they knew the tensions going on surrounding them. This was an area completely rife with racial strife. Elijah Lovejoy is shot dead 50 miles south of here in the 1830s. He's an abolitionist and has his own printing press, and he's shot dead as a mob is burning down his house in the printing press. A town called Griggsville is just only about 10 miles from New Philadelphia. There's race riots there in the 1830s, 1840s. So this is by no means a frontier area free of racial strife, and yet he's able to accomplish all these remarkable features of creating an integrated town that is good purposely and explicitly to obtain funds to buy his family freedom.
We're fairly certain that an abolitionist community of free black people who were actively getting their families out of Missouri and Kentucky to come and live here would not have been something that would be unknown to the abolitionist Underground Railroad network.
Everybody knew when you got to New Philadelphia, you had a pair of shoes and a horse and directions or a guide to get you to Canada, which, it's a wonderful story. Frank made such a wonderful contribution to the whole notion of freedom.
It's very hard for archaeologists to find the actual material remains of the Underground Railroad because it's basically intact. So that by 1885, we see in the court records that part of the town was declassified.
African Americans moving into.
But there's a tremendous oral history and then documentary history of the area that gives us every reason to believe that New Philadelphia was an active participant in the Underground Railroad.
After the American Civil War, there's also a migration from the South where we see a lot of African Americans moving into Illinois and Hadley Township and also into New Philadelphia. And that's probably the reason why the town's population peaked in 1865.
In 1869, the town's bypassed by the railroad and the population begins to decline. So that by 1885, we see in the court records that part of the town was declassified as a town and the land reverted for general agricultural use because people had moved away and now it was basically being pulled back into general farming use. We're exploring the reasons for the bypass of the town by the railroad, and we have not yet found any of the traditional reasons of topography made a reason to avoid the town. And it may be that fits within we're going to find that fits within the story of racial impacts, that there may have been some sort of racial bias of the actual route of the railroad, and that's an ongoing research question for us.
The early settlers dug a cellar hole, they built a cabin around it, and after the town was abandoned, they'd start filling it with trash. And the trash is what we're after. We're interested in other people's garbage because that gives us a clue about what people are buying, what they're consuming, their access to markets, their dietary habits.
The more households we can excavate, compare the data, compare the material culture, the building styles that we can infer of architecture, the richer picture we'll have of the history of the town.
We've been here about 4 weeks now. We found a lot of glass, just flat glass and ceramic. And then in the past couple of days, we found a key. So that was a really cool find.
We just found a small cylindrical piece that could be a game piece or a doll over by where Jason and Hillary are working.
And we've also found there's, you can't see it anymore, but there used to be like some ash. And so one idea that we have is that it might have been like a fireplace. We've been finding a lot of burned bones and a lot of animal bones over in this area over here. And that's really where we found the majority of our artifacts.
And once the artifacts are washed and sorted out in the field, we bring them in here in drying trays to dry. And then we put them in artifact bags and take them to the museum where we'll catalog them. So it's porcelain feet. We think they're from a doll. We found some other fragments. We haven't tried to put them all together yet.
The last couple of days will be.
Okay, so that's the information about New Philadelphia and Free Frank McWorter, who was the founder. And as you can see, that was his descendants that was on there talking. So that's the information. That's all I have for today. And if you tune in, if you come in and you want to know what the video is about, you have to watch it from the beginning. So for those who want to go ahead and support the Cash App, that's the information at the bottom. You know what I'm saying? If you want to share this video, you're more than welcome to do so. If you make sure to share it and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell whenever I come on. Thank you all for watching. For those of you that came in, and thank you for those that was in the chat. So again, I give my greens to y'all. You guys have a wonderful day. And until next time, until the next video, I will see you guys later. And we have more to talk about. Well, excuse me. I have more to talk about. So yeah, I have more to talk about and I have more information to present. So be on the lookout for that. All right. All right, then. So with that being said, peace and thank you all so much. All right. Take it easy. Be blessed.